Hello and welcome to the 4 C's of Recovery, a Real Ideas webinar. Following the big picture thinking of our previous Imagining the Future Normal Education webinar, today we're delighted to launch our recovery curriculum thinking. And this webinar introduces our approach through what we're calling the 4 C's. And those 4 C's are creativity, culture, connection, and community. Real Ideas has a strong history of supporting arts and culture, creativity, digital opportunities as part of a rich school provision, both as the Arts Council's Bridge organisation and as a cultural organisation and social enterprise in the Southwest in its own right. I'm joined today by 3 hugely experienced colleagues, and together we will share our thinking around the 4 C's, outline the practical activity that will be on offer in September, and the way in which we hope to develop communities of practice that will support you as school leaders, subject coordinators, arts and cultural organisations in the months to come. I'm Gary Futcher. I'm Programme Lead for Educating Differently at Real Ideas, and alongside me are Jonathan, Sarah and Deshni, who I'm now going to ask to introduce themselves. So, Jonathan.
Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan, Head of Learning at Rio. Yeah, really excited to be here and start this conversation about our communities of practice.
Sarah.
Hello, I'm Sarah Waller and I'm a Programme Coordinator working alongside everybody here at Rio. And again, really excited to see what kind of discussions we can start to provoke through today.
Lovely, thank you. Deshni.
Thanks, Gary. Hi, everyone. My name is Deshni Pyndiah and I am a Programme Operations Manager for the organisation. Alongside that, I also provide bespoke consultancy support to education settings and also the creative and cultural sector. So thanks for having me along today.
Lovely, and I'm just going to push each of you just a little bit, just to talk just very briefly about some of your experiences that inform your thinking, because I know you're all kind of experts in your various fields, and it would just be really interesting for people to know where you're coming from. So obviously my background is schools, English and drama teacher, head teacher, so that whole kind of life in school. Jonathan, what about you?
Good question. So my background a long time ago is teaching in schools. So but I've worked for Rio for it's coming up to nearly 12 years now. And inside of that, I've had done lots of work and been really interested in schools in all of their aspects. So very much in terms of learning and curriculum, supported lots of schools around curriculum approaches and supporting thinking around connecting what's happening in the classroom with the real world and with approaches to purposeful curriculums, and to the best of my ability I've tried to stand and be with schools as much as possible and support them in connecting to stuff that's happening outside, and that's very much the sort of the purpose of these conversations. And also really at the moment, and I'm going to be talking about it a little bit later, but doing a lot of stuff in relation to digital and schools, how schools connect with the digital sector, the creative industries, and how digital is already and going to play a really big role in what's possible in that space.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah.
So I suppose my background is in dance education, really. I think I've rolled around on quite a lot of school floors in my life, got to know, intimately what school dinners were left on the floor. But I've worked mainly within the Southwest and in Cornwall for a very long time, as both a dance practitioner, but also as an advanced skills teacher and then a consultant, looking at how to encourage schools to have that confidence around working differently. So a lot of work that I've done is with very, very small primary schools who possibly didn't even have a school hall. So how the heck do you do dance if you don't have a school hall? So it's about sort of shifting perceptions of what happens where and who participates. And very often, a lot of work is around overcoming perceptions of difficulty around engaging young people in that kind of passionate exploration of arts and culture. So yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Deshni.
So a lot of my work really revolves around working with schools and communities. So we do a lot of work as a social enterprise ourselves. I'm going to talk a bit about this later, but we really believe in and are passionate about social enterprise education. So a lot of my work in the 6 years that I've been here is about working with schools and helping them to embed social enterprise principles into curricula, into learning programs, and also helping schools to set up school-led social enterprises. So it's really about helping schools to think a little bit differently, think outside the box. So yeah, quite a broad range of experience, but hopefully useful to the audience today.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you. And I think it was important there because if this is about a community of practice, yes, we have expertise, and I think it's important for people to kind of know where we're coming from and the experiences that we've got that underpin our work, but that we're looking for that equitable encouragement of community and research. So thank you. The 4 C's. In shaping our recovery response, we've drawn on a range of research and thinking, as well as our own expertise, as you've heard. I think it's important to stress that recovery in terms of schools will mean different things to different schools. It's a very personal approach. It's even an approach at the moment where some people are balking at the word recovery. What are we recovering from? We're about continuation or re-engagement and so on. So, you know, we take the language with a healthy dose of salt, but what we're looking at is shaping and thinking about the ways in which we can support schools and communities to have resonance in different settings, maintaining broad, balanced, rich curriculums, supporting well-being of both people and staff. The important caveat about our 4 R's and our approach is we're not about a golden bullet. We're not about a do as we say approach. We are definitely about developing and exploring approaches that might work. We can provide the advice, the support, the areas of interest, and help you on that journey, but it is as much about your contributions to that as it is to ours. So as we talk through, please do use the question function that's available on your control panel. Ask questions away, support us as we go, anything like that. Observations would be great as well. And what we'll do is we're going to take each of the 4 C's in turn. Each one of us is going to talk for a little while around our thinking in that particular area, and then we'll pull together towards the end of this webinar. So we're going to start with Sarah. Each of our 4 C's has its own definition. You'll have seen those in the original sign-up information. And we're going to focus first on culture. And we framed culture as building the rich cultural capital around us into the curriculum, and crucially taking a school's individual context as the starting point. So Sarah, culture, over to you.
It's always a tricky one to start with, isn't it, in terms of culture, because it's perceptions. What do we mean by culture? It's a hugely broad area to start thinking about. But I think what I wanted to really start with is that there's creativity and there's culture, and they're deeply connected, but they are different. And that creativity is the process by which, you know, we individually can make something new, or we can make a work of art, or we can reimagine something, or we can engage with an idea or an existing piece of work. But the culture is a result of that creative process. It's what we sort of encounter. It's where we find it in museums or libraries or theatres or galleries or carnivals or festival halls, and in digital spaces. But it's also that kind of culture that we encounter every day. And I think that, for me, at the moment, is really important in what we're discussing around the recovery curriculum, the ideas of recovery, is that it's the thing to start with is, where are we now? You know, the culture of everything has shifted massively globally in terms of our norms, and what we're all doing is kind of feeling our way very much through new cultures, emerging cultures. And I know that, you know, in terms of Ofsted and its definition, you know, it talks very much about something around kind of cultural capital. And well, what the heck do we mean by cultural capital? And I think what we're trying to explore is that notion of being engaged in activity, of having that experience that allows you to navigate your way through different networks, to understand different landmarks, to take that with you so that you have a kind of richness that gives you that social mobility, that social conversation, to be able to navigate your way through the world. And I think the part that I think has been really important in reflection on what's been happening to all of us over the last few months is that our world became very small. And for a lot of children, you know, where perhaps suddenly there was time, that we were bombarded with a whole array of cultural activity. There was everything from, you know, online dancing to the launch of Disney Plus. We had everything in terms of being able to engage in culture. And I think that has been quite a cacophony at times. It's been quite difficult to navigate our way through some of that. It's almost been quite deafening, I think. There's been a huge amount of it. And I think to try and understand what that is as a child, as a young person, it could be quite tricky. And I think what I noticed actually was the quiet in some of that we were suddenly talking about birdsong, and that we were talking about space and time, and it allowed us to notice that there was culture of, oh, suddenly everyone's got a rainbow in their window. Why are we producing rainbows? Why are we turning to art and painting and singing and baking as a way of allowing us to feel connected to one another? And I think for me, exploring culture right now is to kind of go, okay, well, we don't have to have an idea that culture is something which is about huge theatre productions. It's not necessarily about taking your class to a museum in London. It can actually be what's happening in your community right now. It's what is it that is resonating for the journeys and the stories that are happening now. And I think if anything that's happened over the last few months, it's allowed us to almost have that space to say, well, okay, the culture of getting in the car and going to the shops has changed. The culture of getting dressed and going to school in the morning has changed. And so for children to start to think about those frameworks, they vanished. So what we have to do possibly now in the next bit is go, okay, well, what is it that is about this way of understanding our world that we have been doing for millennia, centuries, which is about looking at it through the lens of art and creativity, that is going to allow us to start to make sense of what's been happening. And I think this is where we've got a really interesting role to play as a way of facilitating the conversations that will come out of understanding the changes in that world. And rather than wheeling in cultures that have very little meaning, possibly, to the children that we have around us, we don't have to suddenly start importing cultures. But it is also a way of going, well, hang on a minute, how do we make sense of our world? Why is it that we've got statues that are toppling? What does that say? What is that culture? And I think that has been a moment where we can now start to look at the ingredients to help us navigate what we might do next.
Thank you. Can I ask just a quick question that's linked to that? You talked about Ofsted, and in Ofsted and the national curriculum, when they define cultural capital, they talk about the best that's been thought and said. It goes back to Matthew Arnold in 1860 something. For us, I guess it's not just about the best that's been thought and said, is it? It is about starting where we're at and the culture capital for the context that we serve.
Absolutely. And I think what's important, I mean, I think that how food has played such an important part in our lives at the moment, from not being able to find anything in terms of accessing supermarkets, but also how communities have stepped up in terms of helping and supporting each other. And out of that, I'm seeing schools starting to develop and share recipes. And they're starting to share and develop the stories that are linked culturally to some of those recipes. And it's that thing about how do we almost go back to the place where this community that has actually been brought together through crisis can start to value some of the stories that have brought us to that place. And I think this is where sometimes schools feel that they have to demonstrate culture in a big way. It's almost a kind of checklist of, well, we've done our workshop on this and we've had this company in and we would like to take everyone to go and see Matilda in London. Actually, what about going to the beach? How is it that for our children this is something that is not necessarily accessible because public transport isn't there? So how do we start to think very much more locally about the culture of our places and the stories, the histories of our places? And I think one of the things I remember from working on a project with Eden many years ago, Eden in Cornwall, was a project called Mud Between Our Toes. And it was because children, there was almost a connection, there was a closer connection to kind of hip hop street culture, which is fantastic, and I love that. But if you're living in kind of rural Cornwall, there weren't that many streets with that kind of hip hop culture. So, but it was that thing about actually how do we start to bridge some of the aspirations around other cultures, but bring it down to the kind of cultures of this place. How do you blend those things together? How do you understand how those cultures grew so that you can learn about them? And I think sort of at the moment, it's an opportunity to really reflect on who are we? Who have we got on our doorsteps? Who have we been clapping for next door? Who have we been talking to over the fence? How have we come together in this? And how do we start to value the smaller parts that make the richness of our culture? And I think that, if anything, I could make a plea about, you know, cultural capital. It's this thing about kindness and this thing about the resonance that gives, allows you to then move forward and respect and understand the culture in the widest context.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. And I think that thing about opportunity is huge. All of what we're talking about, yes, it might be about recovery, but it is also about opportunity and taking the opportunities that are now. We're going to move on to Jonathan next, who's going to talk about our second C, which is connection. Connection for us, we define as exploring immersive, responsive, tech-savvy digital ideas, kit and access to the world of work. So Jonathan, over to you.
Amazing. So yeah, it's I think it's really interesting. I was just reflecting and getting ready for this conversation, and I realized that sometimes you know, we're talking about connection and connection through digital, and sometimes with digital I love it. Sometimes I'm so excited by what it can do. Sometimes I hate it, and I wish that the word digital had never existed in the language. And another time I'm pretty sort of whatever about digital. And I think that in the conversation about this community of practice, is what we really want to explore is it's not digital for the sake of digital. It's about connection. So what we're really interested in is, you know, since lockdown, lots of people have done really extraordinary things with digital as ways of connecting. So schools where they've connected to their communities, the way they've connected to other schools or other groups, the way they've supported their families to connect differently has been extraordinary. Other schools have really struggled in that space of digital and how to connect. Some arts and cultural organisations and practitioners have done, again, amazing things in that space of digital connectivity. And others have struggled. We're really interested in exploring connectivity through digital. We're really interested in what works, what doesn't work, what's hard, what stuff's stuck, what stuff hasn't stuck. And I think the main thing that we're interested in is that bit around, you know, digital is a way of connecting, whether that is about, you know, setting up a digital classroom that people can move into, or a space like this, which is a space to connect, or whether it is about being able to connect to content in a digital way. So whether it's about being able to use digital means to share content with your learners, or to have learners share content with you, or about the development of digital resources. Like, digital can be a way of connecting with ideas and with learning and with things. But with all of that, the question really is like, what are we trying to connect to, and why are we trying to connect to it? And and is digital a good way of doing that? So in terms of this digital, this community of practice, we are going to be I'm quite excited about it, in the sense that what we're going to really look at and explore around this is what is of most interest to the people in the community of practice. So we're going to be able to we're connected to lots of different digital conversations. So we've got a range of digital practitioners that we work with, so from digital artists to people who are really savvy and know about and used to using digital tools in the classroom. And so we have got a set of resources that we can draw on in terms of this community of practice, but we're going to be very much driven by what people are interested in. And I've sort of got 4 potential areas of interest that we'll cover. So we've got one which is, as I've said, about digital and connecting to home. So how have schools, and how can schools connect with home to school? And so everything from social media tools to the way that digital classrooms have been used, that sort of area. We've got another area which is going to be looking very much at digital in terms of connecting to content and ideas. That how can digital be used to make content more exciting, more interesting? How can you take learners to virtual places? How can you make stuff feel more exciting and fun using digital tools and mechanisms? So that's an area that we potentially going to explore as well. Then we're also going to talk very much about, I think everyone's done it, haven't they, since lockdown has got much better at having communication and connecting with people outside of their geographical sphere. So this conversation is much more normal than it was 3 months ago, and it's absolutely the same in the classroom. So before, there was the whole virtual classrooms and talking to the school in Africa and those things, but actually the way that we can connect our classrooms up to visitors, to practitioners, to other experiences, to the world of work, that ability to use digital as a means for getting children out without getting children out, I think becomes really exciting and interesting, and that's a whole area that we can and will explore. And then the last area, or the other area, is very much about how digital can be used to connect them to their futures. So particularly, we're doing a lot of work currently around digital credentials and digital careers and digital virtual work experience, and a set of practice in that area. So we're really interested in how can that stuff be done really well, what works in it, how can we use digital tools to support pupils to think about the future and what the future might be for them and what they might want to be in the future. And we've got a range of different interesting partners who can come and be part of our community practice, who are developing sort of virtual platforms, who are developing different virtual work experience models, who are using digital credentials in a different way. I think on the link there's some links that we'll be sending out later, and there's a lot of stuff that you can explore. We lead on the Cities of Learning project, which is going to be growing regionally, and that looks a lot at the use of digital credentials, particularly in secondary schools. So yeah, a little bit of a round robin tour, but digital's just it's really exciting, isn't it? It's really exciting. It's really frustrating, and the main thing is that it's so broad. We could explore everything in relating to digital, and what we're going to be doing in this conversation on this community of practice is homing in on things that really matter to the people in that community of practice.
And that's the key, isn't it? It has to be of use, and it has to be responsive, and it has to support what's happening in schools and in classrooms, not be an additional burden or an extra. Can I just ask you, Jonathan, just you talk about digital credentials, which might be a phrase that people aren't particularly common with, and I know we've kind of shortened it at times to digital badges. Is there a way you could just really simply let people know, kind of in its simplest form, what that means? A digital badge, why, what?
Yeah, of course. So a digital badge is basically it's like a certificate or a sticker. And in schools, we're really used to using stickers and using certificates to let someone know what they've done or what they've achieved. And a digital badge is just a digital version of a sticker or a certificate. So it enables a school or an arts and cultural organisation or anyone to create a way of acknowledging that someone has participated and done really well at something. And there is digital credentials are growing around the world, so they're exponential growth. They're being talked about as the new sort of digital currency for learning. So most formal qualifications will also become digital qualifications soon. But there is also what it enables, which I love about it, is it gets you to create credibility around stuff which is not always as valued. So you can create a digital badge for a head teacher's award, and you can. My daughter's in primary school, and she just got a badge for super sitting. So she got a certificate for super sitting. You can create a digital badge for cyber security skills, or you can create a digital badge for super sitting, and they both sit on the same platform. So it really enables you to credentialize a really broad range of things, and it's an area that's just really, really interesting to get into. So it's
and I'm right in thinking, aren't I, that not only do they do that credentializing, but they sit for all time with young people. So not only do they have a badge with lots of data behind it about what they did and how they did it, but they can start to attach them to CVs and so on as well. So there's actually a value, not just for itself, but in how it represents you to employers and the world of work.
Yeah, 100%, and they're used as a way of being able to tell the story of your learning. So to be able to, in a really visual and professionalized way, be able to say, this is the stuff that I've done, and this is how it fits with me, and it's shareable on all of the platforms. And the credentialing platform that we use is the one that's used by Microsoft and Oracle and all of the big companies use micro credentials within how they support progression within those organizations. So what's exciting about this is that you're giving young people in Plymouth the opportunity to have a badge which sits on the same platform as a Microsoft employee who works in San Francisco or New York.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you. Just to remind you that there is a question and comment function, so if there are questions you want to pose or comments you want to share with us, please do. I'm going to move on to Deshni now, who will explore some of our thinking around community. And again, for us, for our definition, community is linking to real, socially enterprising, place-based opportunities, funding and expertise, with schools placed firmly at the heart of their communities. Over to you, Deshni.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, for us, community in schools is quite an exciting one, because we've done quite a lot of work over the years with schools, with many schools and communities, to really understand the different ways in which schools can connect in a very grassroots way to their communities, and vice versa, to create value not only for the pupils but the wider community. And I think as a social enterprise, we've got so much experience of setting up and running our own businesses and supporting others to do so, including schools. And we're, like I said earlier, we're really passionate about social enterprise as a tool for learning. So embedding social enterprise approaches and the principles of social enterprise into curriculum, and linking as much as possible to the real world experiences. So this is where community becomes super important, right? Because your local community, whatever you define your local community as, is really rich. It's a really rich resource of people, of resources, skills and organisations that can really start to bring your curriculum to life and create those powerful learning opportunities for pupils, but also can support the whole school in really interesting ways. So like you said, Gary, earlier, we really believe that schools sit at the heart of communities, and we really understand that they're uniquely placed to make a difference in the world and well, within their community and the whole school. So I'm going to take you back to 2016, 2018, when we delivered a pilot innovation program, which was us working with schools and testing kind of our theory about schools sitting at the heart of communities and being able to help transform communities. And I think currently COVID-19 has showed how fragile kind of our societies are and how communities are, but what I think Sarah's touched on this already, like how communities have come together to support each other. So I think schools have a really big part to play in that kind of jigsaw puzzle. But so the project that we were leading on was exploring the role of schools as community hubs, as catalysts for social enterprise activity, community business activity. And we found that the schools on that programme flourished in many ways when they're part of what we call a connected schools ecosystem. So when we talk about a connected school, we mean a school that is deeply connected.
It looks like Deshni's frozen mid exploration. So while we try to get her back, what we'll do is we'll get Deshni to pick up in a moment when she's back. I'll move on to creativity, which was the fourth of our 4 C's. So creativity is really defined for us. It's shaping opportunities for young people to apply knowledge, skills and intuition to imagine, conceive, express and make. And it's really been shaped by 2 documents that have come out in the last 6 months. It feels like a lifetime ago, but we're talking kind of October, November last year, just that long ago. And the 2 documents are Let's Create, which is the Arts Council's new tenure strategy, so a strategy that takes us up to 2030, and also a document produced by the Durham Commission. And the Durham Commission were conceived to focus on the role of creativity in education. So those 2 documents came out around about the same time, and they really set the stall out about the place for creativity in our lives generally and in schools specifically. I think what they do, and the links are there in the chat, what they do is give you a really handy expression of the thinking around the place of creativity in the lives of young people. The Let's Create strategy sets out its stall in its name. It's called Let's Create, and it really is about placing creativity at the heart of what we do. Sarah said at the beginning, you know, for them, the definition of creativity is that ability to conceive and to make something new or refashion something from something that's been made before, which then creates the culture which we enjoy and consume. So there's that definition. And for the Arts Council, they framed it around 3 outcomes. And again, what you'll start to see is how these outcomes all start to link together. So their first outcome is around creative people. Their second outcome is around cultural communities, so community in terms of what we're talking about. And their third is that in itself will then create a creative and cultural country as a whole. So what we're thinking about is that place of creativity in the lives of young people, their ability to explore it, develop it, use it as much as anything else. And what's really interesting from a school's perspective, from an education perspective, is probably the Durham Commission, because that 18-month commission really looked at how creativity can be explored effectively in terms of schools, and we're talking from birth to the age of 19. I think one of the areas that is increasingly coming into focus. Hello, Deshni, you're back with us. I'll finish off and then I'll come back to you if that's okay. is early years as a key driver in some of our thinking going forwards. I think the importance of this is that the belief that's outlined in Let's Create is that everyone can be creative, and we all have the potential to develop our creativity further. And that's one of the things that is a key driver. And as Sarah's alluded to, it clearly has an impact on people's well-being, mental health, positivity. We've seen that complete explosion of creativity in terms of homeschooling, in terms of the pictures in windows and rainbows in windows. We know that it's a positive way to express. And for us, I guess it's about not losing that in the return to the current systems. So one of our communities of practice is definitely looking at the way in which we can shape creativity in schools going forward. I think the other thing that's important to say, and it's recognised in the commission, is that there's no conflict between knowledge and creativity. I think we're probably in a land a little bit with the new Ofsted framework, with the whole business of intent and implementation and impact, of thinking about knowledge first. And I think knowledge has its place, and knowledge is a key driver, but from that knowledge comes creative breakthrough, comes creative expression, comes creative development. So what we need to do alongside the knowledge that we develop in our young people is developing them the ability to know that how that knowledge can be creatively applied, so that actually they are contributing more fully to their own lives and to our creative life as a whole. And I suppose the other one that is important to reflect for all of us is, especially in schools, there will be a driver that will say, well, creativity, that's art and drama and music, and the other subjects don't need to deal with it. And I think that's a huge misconception. And it's about looking at those creative impulses across the curriculum. It's been brought home to me as a father. My son is studying, just coming to the end of a master's in chemistry, but he knows that the key of a lot of that chemical thinking is the creative impulse to think about what if, what could, what might, allied to the knowledge that he has and the absolute rigor of the experimental procedures and processes. And I think there shouldn't be any division. We have STEM and we have now SHAPE as a new acronym that's just arrived, but actually there isn't a division. He was a young man who did maths and chemistry alongside art and design, and actually I see those as complementary. So for me, a lot of it is that ability for us to think through those terms. And the final bit for me is, whilst we in schools are often predicated on GCSE A-level results, BTEC results, those exams, there is clearly an element that is about skills development that sits alongside that knowledge. And wherever you read it, however you read it, there is a lot of evidence out there that future skills that will protect young people in terms of the workforce of the future, that will protect them from robots and automation, is those skills around creativity and expression and interaction are as important as the results in exams. And for us, exploring some of that thinking around creativity is a huge part of what we would look to do in our community of inquiry. Hello, Deshni.
Hello, sorry, the internet
You're
really
back.
kicked me off.
So if you want to pick up where you were,
Yeah.
and just thinking about what Jonathan said about digital being a blessing and a curse, you know, it is a blessing because we've got Wadebridge, we've got Bristol, we've got Plymouth, and we've mainly stayed together. So back to Bristol.
Thanks, Gary. So I think what I was saying before I got kicked off the internet was really taking it back to grassroots and reaching out to your communities and connecting to the richness that's in your communities to create those outcomes for not just your pupils, but for the wider community. And I think I got to the point where I was just about to talk about when schools start to view themselves and communities through the lens of social enterprise or community business, you start to see things a little bit differently. You start to see how, you know, what a wealth of unused facilities a school might have, that can support them to generate income, which is really useful right now, or you start to understand how you can maximise the networks and skills that you've got within your parent community, your staff community, and of your people. So you really start to see things a little bit differently, and you start to understand how you can definitely maximise your position as a school with these really rich networks. And I think once you start to scrape the surface and you kind of do a bit of an audit of who's around you and what organisations are in your local areas, you'll start to see some really interesting potential partnership. So it's really about transforming how schools and communities can interact with each other and work together, particularly in times like this, where you know, communities have had to come together to work in such ways. So it's kind of taking it back to grassroots and understanding the power of local communities really, and the school can benefit greatly from that. So it's not only about creating those real world opportunities for children, it's, you know, unlocking some funding opportunities that your partners might have, or looking at different ways that you can generate income. So it's a huge benefit kind of just within your local community. So it's really about schools and their partners and their communities looking at how they can work together to create future opportunities, not just for the pupils, but also for the well-being of staff and, you know, the local community itself. So that's where I got up to, I think. And I think more than ever, we kind of need those innovative, creative ways of working together and collaborate more often to create these really high quality outcomes for our children and for the future of our young people. And like you say, helping young people access those 21st century skills that they absolutely need, like, you know, resilient problem solving, creativity, those things are called soft skills, but, you know, they're really much needed in times right now. So yeah, so it's really about just tapping into your communities, whatever you define as your community, to see what's out there really. And we've got lots of examples of stuff like this that we'll send out, some links and resources that hopefully will spark some inspiration.
I know this is probably a really difficult, pithy moment, but there's two things that I think for people watching that would be quite useful. Is one, if you can, a simple kind of definition. We bandied the term social enterprise around, kind of what we mean when we say social enterprise. And have you got an example of something that shows that in practice, so that we're not so abstract? We've got, yeah, and this is what a school did. Have you got any opportunity to do that?
Yeah, so I think one of a really great example of us working with schools to create social enterprise is Victoria Academies in the West Midlands. So it's a school in a really diverse area who really wanted to explore different ways of working, and they've embedded social enterprise or business into their curricula. And what they did was set up a spice business. It was very much school-led. School children were involved in every aspect, from blending spices to coming up with spice blends, from branding to pitching to selling. And it also created employment opportunities for parents in that community. So that kind of sat at the heart of that school and the trust. Jonathan, you probably have quite a lot to add to this as well, because you're involved in that. But it's just a really great example of how a school puts enterprise at the heart of its curriculum. So you can start to understand how children can get involved in those real world kind of opportunities, and understand how to pitch and present and communicate and make decisions and problem solve. So when they get to, you know, the real world, they're kind of a bit more prepared. So that's a really great example. And then we've also got another example of a great partnership with Robinswood Primary Academy in Matson in Gloucester. They're a really great community, Matson, and a group of creative and cultural and community and grassroots organisations have come together to create this really fabulous network with the schools. And they work essentially to ensure that culture, creativity and cultural opportunities are accessed by the young people in Matson. So that's just a really great way of, you know, and two ways really of how you can connect your community and have different results. So the partnership is, the school is a key in that partnership and in the Cultural Matson partnership, and they're at the table when decisions are being made and when opportunities are there. So if there's pots of funding that are available, or there's opportunities for the children to get involved in activities, you've got a teacher who can say, yes, we can absolutely get involved, and the decision is made there and then. So it's just opening yourself up to different opportunities.
Lovely, thank you. Jonathan, do you want to add into that?
Well, yeah, I think it's just it's really nice hearing those descriptions, Destiny, but I think one of the things that is really important for us now, and why this community of practice is really important, is it's in a funny way, all of us are recovering. So we've had this conversation about the recovery curriculum, but it's absolutely, communities are different than they were. People are having experiences that they didn't have, and actually no one bit of us can solve stuff or make it work on our own. So the schools are so important and so integral to the way communities work and operate and feel themselves and connect. So this community practice is very much going to be exploring that stuff of, what are the models which enable schools and their communities to work together to repair and to rebuild and to support and to hug and to, build that stuff together. And on this, we don't have any of the magic answers I know some of the people are on this call, and there's some amazing examples of schools that are being, enterprising in that sense of how do you make stuff happen, and how do you bring people into your school, and how do you take your school out, and how do you bring the models to, whether that's fairs or businesses or whatever it is. It's the activity which glues and sticks schools and communities together. And I think in this time of recovery, those models for how to do it, which unlock resources and which share support and bring things together, are really important. I think I'm really excited. All the communities of practice, but this community of practice in particular is just, it really matters right now. And people are doing incredible stuff in this space. So part of the community of practice is how to bring people who are doing amazing stuff together to talk about it and share it and connect it with each other.
And to pick up that point, Jonathan, we've had a kind of comment and question from Vicky Kent. She says, this is great and what organisations like ours have been doing for years, yet schools are so focused on curriculum and government stats and performance, they don't seem to value or focus on the extra or enriched curriculum activities. How will we bring about the change needed to shift focus on the importance of these 4 C's? And I suppose for me, I would instantly say, I think the new Ofsted framework helps us hugely because it is focusing back on broad and balanced. It is focusing beyond core. It is about your curriculum, not about your results. I mean, it is, but not to that level. Schools will be called to account for the intent and the design of their curriculum that is a broad and balanced one that has cultural capital involved in it. So I think that does help us. And I think it's also about bravery. It's about exactly what Jonathan said. It's about some schools, it's about being brave in it. It's about hearing the examples of schools that have, and it's about these communities of practice, which will shape both approaches and evidence to say to people, these things work. They do make that difference. They are huge. Another question that, Jonathan, go on. You were ready to say.
I've got something to say about all of it, but I think it was just following on from that point. Is it's one of the things that we heard a lot during lockdown, particularly, was this all the stuff that schools are not doing and weren't doing right, and it's so quick and so easy for communities to sort of think of what schools should be doing that they're not, rather than that conversation very much around, there's a bit like schools are extraordinary places, absolutely extraordinary places, and what they do every day is extraordinary. And there's that sense of how do we hug them? How do we create a space where actually what happens in school can really be connected into the rest of the community in a way that works for the school and on the school's terms. So, and I'm sure the person asked the question completely knows that, in terms of, you can't make anything happen in a school without really understanding and valuing where the school's coming from. But I do think that we can't lose that in this conversation about recovery and what we do next. It's really starting from how do we serve schools and what schools need, rather than the other way around, I think.
Thank you. And one from Simon Wainwright says, schools need ways to demonstrate how creative activity is contributing to core subjects and or impacts on behaviour, how can we empower schools to be brave and develop creative curriculums? Anybody want to respond? Sarah, your finger was first in the air.
I remember running a project with a primary school in Cornwall a little while ago who had quite significant behavioural difficulties, and we were working alongside a project which was from QCA around sport, and we were exploring how we children
got a bit of a, sorry Sarah, we've got a bit of a buzz on the line, just losing you slightly. Just try again for me.
Again.
Yeah, it's better.
That's better. Okay. I was involved in a project a little while ago, working with QCA with a tiny primary school in Cornwall, which was struggling around sort of the fact that every lunchtime and break time there was a queue of kids outside either the head store because stuff had gone on, or they were waiting to see someone who could kind of patch them up in terms of they'd fallen over or they'd hurt something, and there was an understanding that this was actually losing quite a lot of time in terms of children being able and ready to learn in the classroom. And one of the things that we started to explore was actually using evidence that was how many kids have you got in your queue this week standing outside the door, in terms of over the number of weeks that the project happened, to the fact that there might have only been 1 or 2 maybe, rather than the usual 5 or 6 or 7. And it was to do with this whole thing about a sense of personal space, and about how kind of you can use your sense of perception around space. And we worked with a professional dancer for a number of weeks, going in to work with young people around kind of movement and how hard it was to kind of physically work with somebody and to cooperate. And gradually there was this awareness of physicality that translated into how kids behaved in the playground, in terms of they knew how quickly it took them to run from one side to the other, or how hard they pushed somebody and then they fell over. And this was something that absolutely then contributed to the fact that they were back in their classroom ready and able to learn far more than they were before, in terms of after every lunchtime or after every playtime. And I think some of it is about looking for other evidencing where you can use mechanisms, things like the sports premium, that gives you lots of time to justify using dance as part of the curriculum. It's one of the only 3 things that's statutory in terms of the PE curriculum. It's dance, outdoor education and swimming. And actually, if you start to think about how you use dance to explore the whole curriculum in terms of geography, history, where you dance, can you dance on a beach, can you dance on a cliff top, all of those sorts of things, rather than just sort of presuming it has to happen, you know, in your school hall or even around a maypole. You know, what could you do that starts to shift the perception of what art form you use where? And it's that kind of creative potential that then unlocks other ways of opening the curriculum, I think.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think that's absolutely true. You know, for all of us, we've worked with a range of schools, and certainly my experience in looking after ArtSmart, for example, is lots of schools who use that as a framework for all sorts of different reasons. One, because their school is narrowed and they want to shape. Others, because they want to celebrate what they do. So I think of the school in Wiltshire, Horningsham Primary. They are a school of 75 children. A Platinum ArtSmart school awarded last year, because they've made the decision that the creative curriculum is rooted right at the heart of what they do. Their curriculum isn't all of the other bits and then creativity. It's creativity first, and that drives the curriculum and how it transcends. Now, clearly, it's different for different schools. We said right at the beginning, this is a hugely kind of very personal journey for individual schools in terms of how they develop in their recovery. I think Simon is absolutely right. I think it is about bravery, and what we hope is that the research that we can put out, the communities of practice we start to draw together, will provide some of that confidence to explore. And for me, it goes back to our webinar a couple of weeks ago around the new normal. it's really fighting the urge to just go back to the old normal and the old way of doing, and finding some fresh opportunities. We have 5 minutes left. What I'm going to ask is each of the panelists, just for a kind of a concluding wish or a concluding thought in terms of the 4 C's and what we hope to see for schools and educationists over the next year or so. So they're inscrutable faces at this stage. Sarah, do you want to go first? Just a final concluding, what's here, what's in the heart?
I think I've been really aware of how, you know, in terms of preparing today and thinking about culture in its widest sense, and what that means right now is that I'm aware that, you know, culture is that route through to inspiration and delight. It's something that can provoke and it can uplift us and it can unite communities and it brings joy, and it's a way of you know, even things like, you know, spending time outdoors, which we've all been desperate to do, and understanding that, you know, being tuned in to nature, being tuned into our environment, that has the potential for lessening this strange world that we're finding ourselves in to impact on all of us. And I think it's that sort of resilience really that my wish is that we can use this as a vessel to travel on this shaky sea and find a way of, you know, navigating that unites us with that real joy, the joy that culture has at its heart.
Lovely, thank you. Deshni, what about you?
I think for me, I think this time has just really shown how important not only schools are, but communities are. And I think it's really about communities, like Jonathan was saying, really valuing what schools do and vice versa. So really, I think it's just about us uniting and working together in those kind of grassroots ways that we used to do before. So coming together and just forming partnerships to create these resilient communities that, you know, because if we've got resilient communities, we've got thriving families and children, and it's vibrant and everyone's living, you know, hopefully great lives. So I think it's just coming back to those kind of old school grassroots partnerships of communities and people working together in reciprocal, meaningful ways.
Thank you. Jonathan, who is muted at this moment?
Helps, there you go. Love technology. I think it does come back to where it all started, which is that we've been locked down for so long. Is like now really is the time to connect, and what digital does is it's, you know, actually the world opens up if we start thinking about what's the way that you can connect using digital means, and everybody started connecting differently, and schools can and will start connecting differently, and it's the start of a, you know, I think we're on the start of how people can start using digital in a really different way. So for me, what I'm left with is this is just the beginning of a conversation. It's not, there's no real conclusion yet. It's like actually really excited about getting stuck into a digital practice which explores how do we continue to connect and find new ways of connecting as technology develops to enable us to do it.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I think for me, from the creative angle, it is the absolute truth in all of those pictures in windows and all of that return to creative activity in homes across the country that showed the true value of arts and creativity and culture and community to keep us well, keep us healthy, keep us hopeful. Of course, this is the start of a programme of work for us across the next year. And what we are keen for is for you to be involved in this work. We're planning to develop these communities of practice around each of the 4 C's over the autumn term. There'll be a series of more focused webinars, a series of workshops for people to explore some real practical routes through, and also potentially some one-to-one opportunities to really kind of work with individuals on practice that's going on in schools. They'll run from September initially, the best way to find out and keep up to date is to sign up as a Real Ideas member. You can do that for free, and you can do that on our website, which is www.realideas.org. And then in September, as part of membership, we will put out that information around the communities of practice. Thank you for your time. Thank you to the three of you for your contributions this afternoon. And to everybody out there, when you get to your summer holidays, please have a restful one, because we know how much you've done for us and our children over the last 3 or 4 months. So thank you all very much indeed. Have a great summer. Thank you.
Thank you.